beauty, and power. Words that define Florence's golden age. Halfway through the 15th century, the city was the epicenter of the Italian Renaissance. Here, the powerful Medici, a family of bankers and merchants, ruled without crown or scepter. It was under their patronage that two of the greatest icons of art history were born: Spring and the birth of Venus. These universal icons were created against a backdrop of power, religion, and intrigue. It was a time in which art became a political tool, an era of rebirth and splendor, violence and betrayal. The artist behind these masterpieces was a great visionary. The leading man of Florence's golden era, Botticelli.
Botticelli transcends time, he transcends language, he's part of our shared cultural consciousness.
Ritengo Botticelli il più grande pittore se mai esistito al mondo.
He was an influencer, Renaissance style.
E qui sta la modernità e la novità di Botticelli, in questa bellezza filtrata, trasformata, creata. Botticelli è inconfondibile.
He's a great designer. This is this extraordinary ability that made his success in 15th century that is still palpable today.
Florence, 8th of April 1492. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as the Magnificent, dies. He is only 43 years old. Girolamo Savonarola, the fire and brimstone Dominican friar, whose sermons fanned the flames of religious fanaticism in the city, casts his prophecy from the pulpit. The divine sword would strike Florence at Lorenzo's death. A lightning bolt hits the lantern atop the dome of the cathedral, a sinister sign in the Florentine skies, predicting the end of an era. Florence without Lorenzo plunges into darkness. Its golden age of wealth, beauty, and dominance is over. It is the end of what is known as the Florentine Spring, an era of wild carnivals and unbridled celebrations. An era of creativity that inspired some of the greatest artists of all time. Botticelli witnesses those years and depicts them in his canvases. His life and that of Lorenzo the Magnificent are inextricably linked and always will be.
Lorenzo de' Medici was the political leader of Florence, but he was also the cultural leader of Florence. Think of this, he was one of the greatest poets of his day. There are no leaders like that today.
He was a banker. He was a really unusual character because he cared deeply and passionately about the arts, but he was also a ruthless manipulator, and he wanted to use culture to his advantage.
grande diplomatico, abilissimo, è il grande imprenditore che assolda i migliori artisti del tempo, sembra fatto apposta per governare. La Firenze di Lorenzo è una città di 100.000 abitanti, quindi una delle più grandi dell'Occidente. È la città più importante dal punto di vista finanziario. Nella Manhattan, nella Wall Street dell'Europa. Il rovescio di questa medaglia è un regime di grande sospetto. C'è un sistema di polizia molto efficiente che soprattutto si vede di notte. Uscire di notte senza un normale salvacondotto può portare anche all'essere ammazzati sul posto tranquillamente.
It's in this city, etched in light and shadow, that Sandro Botticelli, one of the great masters of Florence's golden age under Lorenzo the Magnificent, was born in 1445. A complex character, who Giorgio Vasari, the 16th century historian, described as being of a demanding nature, restless, troubled, and enigmatic.
Botticelli's name comes from the nickname of the artist's brother. The word botte means barrel. Maybe it means his brother was a bit tubby. Or maybe it means that his brother liked to drink a bit. Or maybe a bit of both. Botte, little barrel, Botticelli.
Botticelli era nato a Firenze da una famiglia di umili origini. Il padre era un gallicaio, cioè era un conciatore di pellame. La via dove la famiglia si era trasferita si chiamava Via Nuova d'Ognissanti, ora detta Via del Porcellana. Botticelli ha avuto la fortuna di lavorare e vivere in famiglia. La bottega era di proprietà di suo padre.
By the age of 25, Botticelli had already made an impression on the Medici family. But his real breakthrough came in 1470, when he snatches a commission from two other giants of the time, Piero and Antonio Pollaiolo. He explodes onto the Florentine art scene with his painting, Fortitude.
Botticelli was not very scrupulous, and he probably see the opportunity to make a grand entrance. He really makes a coup.
Botticelli was able to work his way into the commission. That was against the rules. He had to have someone powerful behind him, helping him. And who was that powerful person? Lorenzo the Magnificent.
Le 7 virtù sono le 3 virtù teologali, fede, speranza e carità, e le 4 cardinali, fortezza, prudenza, giustizia e temperanza. Viene da rimpiangere il fatto che Botticelli abbia dipinto soltanto una di queste virtù, perché è veramente già un'opera di una maturità e di una abilità incredibili.
fortitude really glows with all sorts of colored reflections, metallic reflections. All the texture are extremely well worked out, with a beautiful palette that will become his palette from the beginning, with very strong purple, red, blue, and this kind of metallic reflection, which is absolutely mind-blowing. The fortitude is really close to you when you look at her. This is something that is a constant within Botticelli's way of working design. It is looking at how things will be seen by the spectator.
In Renaissance Florence, the soft power of art is exploited to its fullest. Botticelli, highly skilled at engaging the spectators with his sacred and profane images, is a master in painting myths and symbols to be used as warning signs for people entering public spaces.
Renaissance church in Botticelli's time. Everyone could see the frescoes. So you look up and you would see not only the magnificent paintings, but also portraits, people you know. The heads of state, the wealthy bankers, they paid artists to create their works, and they wanted their own faces to appear.
So if you need to make a statement, you have to use artists. Artists become the spokespeople for people like the Medici family who want to say something about their power, their piousness, their status. A great example is the Adoration of the Magi.
L'adorazione ai magi ha un grande valore politico. I magi, per la tradizione medievale, sono anche re, quindi è un auspicio per i futuri fasti monarchici della famiglia Medici.
Botticelli takes this biblical scene and he inserts all the members of the Medici family into it as if they were there. Cosimo, Piero, Giovanni and Giuliano were all there at the birth of Christ. Their portraits are in the center of the painting.
This painting is a revolution in design. It's probably the first non-linear depiction of the story. Botticelli places the Holy Family at the center of the painting, raised above the scene, with all the other characters symmetrically arranged on either side. The setting, a dilapidated Roman ruin, implies that Christianity is the only truthful way.
Lorenzo himself was still alive, so he shows him off to the side. Off on the right-hand side, we see a young man looking very proud, looking out at the viewer directly. That's the self-portrait of the artist.
Ci guarda con un'aria di orgoglio, di sfida, in un certo senso dice: guardate dove sono, io sono con i Medici, sono uno degli artisti introdotti alla corte medicea.
To me, it looks like Botticelli is saying, look at me, here I am, I'm here in the center of the world. It's an electrifying moment in history, and Botticelli is right there.
Young, talented, handsome, but also fiercely ambitious. Botticelli is proud to be part of the Medici's cultural elite, an exclusive circle he has already depicted in one of his first masterpieces, the Sant'Ambrogio altarpiece.
I due santi in primo piano sono stati convincentemente identificati ormai come Lorenzo e Giuliano suo fratello. Sono inginocchiati come d'uso davanti alla Vergine. In questa posizione saranno aggrediti nella cattedrale di Santa Maria del Fiore per la congiura dei pazzi.
The Medici were arguably history's greatest patrons of the arts. But the dynasty was steeped in intrigue and vendettas. And with the Pope as one of their enemies, the fight for power would soon erupt with unspeakable violence. Easter Mass, 26th of April 1478, in Florence's Santa Maria del Fiore.
Lorenzo e il fratello Giuliano dalla loro casa in Via Larga fanno una cinquantina di metri e vanno a messa in cattedrale.
Dome, that one of the most dramatic stories of the Italian Renaissance unfolds.
Verso la fine della messa vengono fatti oggetto di un attentato, vengono circondati da uomini che li pugnalano.
A daring assassination attempt against the Medici carried out by their rivals, the Pazzi family.
Pazzi means crazy. They plotted to overtake the Medici. They were even in connection with the Pope in Rome.
Pazzi family was an old enemy, a rival of the Medici family within the ruling of Florence.
I pugnalatori di Lorenzo non sono granché abili. Lorenzo viene ferito solo di striscio. Giuliano viene assalito con grande ferocia, anche proprio con odio personale, e viene crivellato letteralmente da decine di colpi di pugnale. Alcuni si vedono ancora sui resti ossei di Giuliano.
The Pazzi conspiracy was a coup d'etat blessed by the ferocious Pope Sixtus IV. People and freedom, the conspirators cried. The attack was triggered by the urge to seize political control of Florence.
Se vogliamo fare un paragone azzardato fino a un certo punto, possiamo pensare a John e a Robert Kennedy in fondo. Li accomuna anche il destino tragico. In effetti c'era una congiura, si può dire internazionale, volta a eliminare Lorenzo.
Lorenzo's revenge for the death of his brother was swift and merciless. The streets of the city and beyond ran red with his enemy's blood. A reminder of the Medici's might and the glorification of his brother's death.
Lorenzo was able to capture the people responsible for killing his brother, and he had them hanged outside the Palace of Justice.
To ensure that this act of treason would never be forgotten, Botticelli is commissioned to produce the so-called defamatory paintings.
The people walking by were able to see these images of the conspirators hanging in disgrace. There's a clear example of how art is being used to disgrace people. Today, we see that through social media. In the Renaissance, you did it through public painting.
Botticelli's defamatory paintings became a powerful propaganda tool. de facto advertising the Medici's supremacy by consigning their version of the attack to history. He is also entrusted with a much more delicate task, to paint a portrait of his dear friend, Lorenzo's murdered brother, Giuliano. This portrait will become the apotheosis of Giuliano's martyrdom.
Botticelli dipinge, se ne conoscono diverse versioni, un ritratto funebre post mortem di Giuliano. Il prototipo è riconosciuto in quello della National Gallery di Washington, in cui c'è la tortora, c'è la porta aperta, ci sono dei riferimenti alla morte, all'aldilà.
This memorial portrait of Giuliano was based in part by Botticelli's personal knowledge. He knew Giuliano. He'd seen him when he was alive, and now he created an everlasting image of him when he was dead.
Botticelli conosce benissimo i fratelli Medici. Lorenzo è brillante, Giuliano è più bello, è un po' più giovane, è un grande seduttore. Si ritrae un personaggio che in fondo è un morto laico, con canoni che servono per ritrarre la santità e che nello stesso tempo suggeriscono la solennità della morte, lo sguardo abbassato, il primo piano efficace. Botticelli ha voluto dare un'immagine di quello che è al tempo stesso la tragedia di una vita spezzata e la maestà di un potere che va al di là della vita stessa.
Giuliano's portrait confirms Botticelli's revolutionary talent as a portrait artist. He moves away from the established, iconic profile popular at the time and introduces the three-quarter frontal pose. His characters break the fourth wall and look directly into the viewer's eyes.
The so-called Smeralda Bandinelli, which is in the V&A, is a very significant example. It is the first recorded portrait of a woman looking directly at the viewer.
Around the same date is Leonardo's Ginevra da Benci. She too looks out. Since Leonardo is more famous today, he's often given the credit of having the first full-face portrait of a woman. But I think it might have been Botticelli. In profile, the viewer is looking at the woman. She becomes an object. But if it's full face, she's looking right out at you.
Women were not meant to look directly at the viewer. They were requested to be humble, to be modest, and therefore to keep their gaze down. She is also very present in a way that she almost comes out of the frame by having her hand prominently in the foreground. So you have the space of the viewer, the intermediate space where the hand is positioned, and the space behind the frame.
I like to think of Botticelli as a problem solver. He created problems for himself, and then he resolved them. A wonderful example is a portrait of a young man holding a medal. That medal is actually 3D. It's raised up from the surface of the panel. So Botticelli had this problem of showing the fingers in paint holding something which is actually raised up from the surface. No one else before tried to do that. It's innovative, it's daring. It's not completely successful, but it's a grand challenge that he gave himself.
We forget sometimes that he's one of the great portrait artists of the Renaissance. We understand their expression, we understand their character. They're very vivid. They feel like eyewitness accounts of his age. He really populated his paintings. They're like a who's who of the day. We can see the faces from history, and in Botticelli's paintings, they come alive.
Lorenzo knows how to use the talent of his best artists to his advantage. In the wake of the Pazzi conspiracy, he uses every means at his disposal to put an end to what has become an outright war with Pope Sixtus IV, a Pazzi ally. The anger of the cruel and powerful Pope had to be quelled.
Lorenzo was a politician. He made peace with the Pope. Of course, he had to. And what did Lorenzo have to offer? The greatest artist of the day.
Art in the Italian Renaissance cements relationships and actually is part of changing history.
So Lorenzo arranged for some of the most important painters of the day to go to Rome to work for Pope Sixtus, to paint the walls of the Sistine Chapel. Here, there were 4 artists: Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Cosimo Rosselli, and Perugino, working at the same time in the same place.
The Pope's demands were clear. The artists had to create frescoes that explained the absolute supremacy of the divinely ordained papal power. Competing against one another, the painters went to work on the same subjects, stories about Moses and Christ. Botticelli painted 3 of them.
Shows the early life of Moses. Here he packs in 7 different scenes into one fresco. There are scenes of horror. There's a murder taking place when Moses kills an Egyptian. Another scene is for 3 temptations of Christ. Botticelli shows him in 3 different parts of the scene, so he encourages you to look around. Perhaps the most important scene is the story of the sons of Korah. Here he packs in 3 different scenes into one panel. In the foreground, we see the punishment of those who rebelled against Moses. We see Botticelli's skill as a storyteller throughout his career.
Botticelli fu arricchito anche di una preziosità maggiore nelle sue pitture, perché il Papa amava molto le lumeggiature d'oro. Da questo momento in poi le opere di Botticelli da ritorno a Roma sono tutte lumeggiate in oro.
Botticelli conquers Rome, but the Eternal City fails to conquer him. At the height of his career, rich and famous, Botticelli returns to Florence and paints the masterpieces that would become global icons. In Florence, the Medici championed the belief that art deserved to be more than just religious decoration. Their city nurtured the most talented artists of the Renaissance, fully supporting their creativity. It was to this hive of innovation and freedom of expression that Botticelli returns in 1483.
You have to imagine a street filled with artists and artisans and assistants. They knew each other, they were friends with each other. They were rivals, yes. They were also collaborators on certain projects.
The workshops were spaces where you have a lot of exchange of ideas. So there was the master, who was the owner, and then of course there was a lot of collaborators and assistants, more or less gifted, more or less trained.
Firenze ha due botteghe polivalenti, importantissime, quella dei fratelli Pollaiolo e quella del Verrocchio. Forniscono disegni per ricami, per tarsie. C'è questo rapporto importante con le arti applicate e avrà anche la bottega di Sandro Botticelli. L'attività era anche quella di preparare delle opere che avevano un certo successo, per esempio la Madonna del Magnificat, il Grande Tondo. Di quella conosciamo il prototipo che è agli Uffizi e qualche decina di opere di dimensioni più ridotte eseguite per lo più dalla bottega.
In the workshops, the main production were the devotional pictures, Virgin and Child with saints, Virgin and Child with angels, in many different compositions and variations, working from a stock of drawings that the masters has produced. So Botticelli was very good at composing prototype, successful formulas that could be reinterpreted and still have this kind of great impact.
His workshop was a bustling place of commerce, churning out pieces of art. Here, through constant practice, Botticelli was able to refine his style and technique, perfecting the use of light, texture, and color. And above all, his drawing.
Il disegno, il contorno delle figure è certamente alla base dell'arte di Botticelli, cioè il disegno lineare. Botticelli è uno degli inventori di questo modo di lavorare. Dal punto di vista tecnico, Botticelli è legato alla tradizione. Preferisce ancora i supporti su tavola, lavora ancora con la tempera e anche quando incomincerà a usare una tecnica mista, cioè con progressiva introduzione della pittura a olio di origine fiamminga, continuerà ad operarla però con stesure molto tirate, molto sottili. I colori erano sempre gli stessi, cioè un numero molto limitato, una ventina al massimo, ma esagerando. E invece pensiamo a quanto vasti sono i risultati conseguiti, le diverse espressioni, i diversi valori, anche con una limitatezza di mezzi per secoli hanno prodotto capolavori che ancora oggi ammiriamo.
In 1493, while visiting Florence and its workshops, scouting for talent, an agent of the Duke of Milan, Ludovico il Moro, wrote,
Sandro di Botticelli, a most excellent painter on panels and on walls. His things have a virile air and are done with the best method and perfect proportion. It could almost be a tweet, so simple. The agent gives this report and Botticelli is listed first. Clearly it's a competitive environment and the people that he's put against are Filippino Lippi, Perugino and Ghirlandaio. I mean, these are the greatest artists of their age, so we know that Botticelli was taken extremely seriously.
What does this letter mean? The first part is easy to understand. He thinks that Botticelli is an excellent painter, and so do we. But then he says that Botticelli's paintings have a virile air. That doesn't make any sense. We associate virile with brawny men. The author of this letter was trying to tell us that Botticelli's works have the qualities of a mature man. They're balanced, they're proportioned, they have everything they need to have. There's a sense of perfection to them.
Between 1478 and 1482, Botticelli worked on a huge panel measuring 2 by 3 meters for a villa belonging to Lorenzo the Magnificent's cousin. The painting is destined to leave its mark forever. It is known as Primavera, spring.
The very ambiguity, the fact that you can't nail down the meaning, that was a beauty. It's the first surviving painting since antiquity to show the ancient gods on a large scale. It must have been extraordinary for the original viewers. They had read about these gods, they had heard about them, but now they could see Venus and Mercury. There's a passage from an ancient text of it which says that when a girl, Chloris, was abducted by Zephyr the wind god, roses came out of her mouth and she transformed into the goddess Primavera, meaning springtime. Roses came out of her mouth? How do you show that? Botticelli found a way of doing it in a way that looks elegant and beautiful. On the right-hand side, we see an image of abduction, of violence. Zephyr, the wind god, is coming out of the tree and grabbing Chloris.
Then Venus in the center, this extremely beautiful but quietly powerful woman. With the three graces perpetually dancing. And then Mercury, who's chasing away the clouds as not to ruin this beautiful spring day. If you think about it just purely as an allegory of spring, the painting works. If you start looking at all the details and you start understanding the kind of cultural and philosophical climate that Botticelli was in, you realize it could take a lifetime to unpick this painting.
La primavera è una splendida espressione di un mondo che è il mondo dell'equilibrio rinascimentale per eccellenza. Quello è un giardino perfetto. L'uomo che fa un giardino collabora con Dio nel costruire la natura perfetta. E questo è il segno profondo di questa pittura su tavola, che è anche l'espressione filosofica della filosofia neoplatonica che Botticelli ha imparato da quello che era il più grande filosofo della corte di Lorenzo, che è Marsilio Ficino.
In spring, the setting is very much like a medieval tapestry. You have this beautiful homage paid to nature with all these different plants. And it's highly decorative as well. Botticelli goes beyond naturalistic imagery to deliver a golden age image, something like the Garden of Eden.
Every figure, every flower, you see him looking very closely at the natural world. But then we see his visionary world. Botticelli and his advisors were looking at various sources, and he brought them together in a new, poetic way.
Poets of the time celebrate him. Philosophers work alongside him. Renaissance art tends to be deeply symbolic, and Botticelli is famous for the many layers of symbolism that inhabit his inscrutable paintings. Known as the Botticellian mythologies, he's able to blend Christian values with mythological pagan figures beautifully. His Pallas and the Centaur is a perfect example.
In Botticelli's time, there was a revival of interest in ancient Rome. There was an interest in ancient art and ancient architecture, but also in the myths of that time. And Botticelli was able to make those myths come alive. In Pallas and the Centaur, we see the triumph of virtue over vice. So it's a moralizing work.
È un'allegoria della dea Pallade che tiene a freno il centauro, che sono gli istinti bestiali, gli istinti ferini, che sono appunto da dominare attraverso la cultura e anche la virtù.
Botticelli is the perfect storyteller for the Italian Renaissance because he's almost 360 degrees. And he doesn't make pagan things pagan, and he doesn't make Christian things Christian. Everything is kind of fluid and blended together.
Probabilmente è un dono di nozze di Lorenzo al cugino che sposa Semiramide Appiani dei signori di Piombino. Perché ci sono nella veste della dea i brevi Medici che sono impresa di Lorenzo.
Botticelli becomes a master in interpreting his clients' wishes and layers his paintings with visible and invisible references to their lives. Venus and Mars, among its many secrets, hides an emblem.
It's a powerful painting, but also he's making a painting that will keep his commissioner happy, because they're in the painting too. If you look closely at the tree trunk, these little wasps are emerging, and they're the symbol of the Vespucci family. And it's saying something about them, about their power, about their status, about them being intellectual and newly read in this city which is just brimming with books and new ideas.
It brings together erudition, eroticism, and humor. We see the beautiful Venus reclining on one side, on the other side, Mars, exhausted after an amorous embrace with his beloved. We see these little half-man, half-goats, these little satyrs running about, playing with Mars's armor. So it's good fun, and it's a beautiful work.
It's an incredibly audacious painting. They're there together after the act of making love. They could practically have a cigarette. And she is so powerful in that scene. Mars is completely sound asleep. The woman seems to have all the power.
Botticelli's women, from his powerful Venus, the beautiful Madonnas, and the Graces in spring, all share a similar, ephemeral, perfect beauty. Did Botticelli have a muse capable of embodying all those attributes? Legend claims Simonetta Vespucci, his neighbor, and a woman of unparalleled beauty, much loved by Giuliano de' Medici, may have been his model. Simonetta was only 23 years old when she died in 1476. Beauty, virtue, grace, and a premature death. The perfect attributes of a legendary muse. But was she?
I think Botticelli has such a great imagination that probably no one woman on earth would be enough for him to be one muse. I think that he's drawing from lots of different sources. He understands that he needs to create the ideal woman, so he'll kind of create her from lots of places, lots of sources. But it's extremely tempting to think that Simonetta was Venus living in Florence.
The idea of beauty created by Botticelli springs from a single origin: his obsessive and unrelenting search for a universal model. Botticelli's ideal Venus embraces everlasting aesthetic parameters, imagination, experimentation, and a search for harmony and proportion. The goddess of beauty created by Botticelli rises from the sea, blown by the wind. The Birth of Venus. One of the greatest masterpieces of all time.
We not only see an ancient goddess, but perhaps for the first time since antiquity, we see full frontal nudity. She's absolutely naked. She covers herself in a way that reveals more than she covers. Her hair is fluttering in the wind. Her drapery is moving. We see roses flying through the air. So nudity, the goddesses, the sense of movement itself, all these are qualities or figures that come from the ancient world that is reborn in Botticelli's day.
La Venere di Botticelli è straordinaria anche perché per la prima volta il nudo femminile non è più usato per mostrare una figura di perdizione, ma la bellezza del corpo di una donna naturalmente, ma poi del corpo umano in generale.
It's an ode to beauty and love. It's very interesting to see that these ideas of beauty which were displayed in the Primavera, in between all these feminine figures, are in a way concentrated and embodied by Venus in The Birth of Venus. At such point that Botticelli will extract this figure and replicate it on a black background as individual figures, as an epitome of beauty. We know that Botticelli devised this type of ideal beauty that fascinated the learned as the unlearned.
Della Venere si dice che è bella, che è femminile e che è il canone della bellezza femminile. All'occhio contemporaneo è lontana da quel canone di bellezza femminile che le viene sempre attribuito. È un corpo perturbante, conturbante, inquietante, androgino e che può essere molto interessante per un pubblico di generazioni nuove.
È una bellezza che trascende il dato realistico, tende a rappresentare una bellezza ideale. Qui sta la modernità e la novità di Botticelli, in questa bellezza filtrata, trasformata, creata.
In Botticelli you have a repertory of beauty, of feminine beauty. And they are also very much like the type of the Virgin in Botticelli's work. They are all the same, and yet they are all different.
Lorenzo the Magnificent's gamble had paid off. Florence had become Italy's capital of art and culture. (1492), the year of Lorenzo's death. After his demise, ideal beauty will be banned from Florence. Its new leader turning it all to ash. O Florence, your sins will bring about many scourges. O priest, here is a storm for your wrongdoings. Convert, or the Lord God Almighty shall never look upon thee again. So spoke from his pulpit the heretic friar Girolamo Savonarola.
Savonarola è convinto che siamo alla fine dei tempi, che il giudizio universale è vicino, che l'umanità, soprattutto la cristianità, sta tradendo il Cristo, sta immergendosi nei peccati e che quindi è rimasto poco tempo se l'umanità vuole salvarsi.
February 1497. A pyramid of fire blazes in Piazza della Signoria. It would become known as the Bonfire of the Vanities. Statues, books and paintings of immense beauty are in flames.
I predicatori del tempo sono dei divi della penitenza. Si va a una predicazione come oggi andiamo a un concerto di una rockstar.
After the death of Lorenzo the Magnificent, Girolamo Savonarola, with his terrifying prophecies, captures the imagination of the masses and rises to become Florence's leader. Speaking against clerical and political corruption, he takes hold of the city. Crowds of over 10,000 people cram into churches and squares to listen to his sermons.
Fra Girolamo riesce a entusiasmare i fiorentini, anche qualche volta a terrorizzarli. Si dice che circolasse il modo di dire: questo frataccio ci farà venir male, nel senso che ci porterà a scalogna, perché predica continuamente sventure se i fiorentini non fanno penitenza.
Botticelli is very ahead of his time, but actually Savonarola was very ahead of his time. He was like a political campaigner. He used the printed press. He spoke in an incredible way. He was one of the great orators of his age. And he created a massive U-turn in the city. Savonarola stopped the Golden Age dead with his sermons. He terrified everybody. And so you go from the light into the dark. Botticelli has to make art for a new era. His clients now, even if they want those beautiful Venuses, they can't ask for them anymore. And so suddenly everything becomes chaste and quiet and moral. And Botticelli is very good at switching and making that kind of work.
There is a rupture in style within Botticelli's production, of course. It's not that Savonarola was against art, but he uses art as a mediator, so art should lead you towards the invisible, towards the divine. And therefore, you could not be stopped by a very beautiful image, because he won't allow you to progress your journey towards meditation and towards the divine. The great question mark is, was Botticelli a follower of Savonarola? Personally, I don't think so, because for such a creative mind, he would have provoked such a crisis that he would have stopped creating, he would have stopped completely.
Was Botticelli a follower of Savonarola? So little is known about his personal life that art historians are still divided. What they do agree on is the gradual yet drastic change in his style that coincides with the friar's rise to power.
If we go to San Marco, where Savonarola himself was the prior, this is almost the epicenter of Savonarola's fiery sermons saying everybody needs to repent. And if you look at the altarpiece that he paints there, suddenly all the gold has come rushing back in, the vision of heaven, the clouds, the vision of God. It's like something from another era.
Botticelli riesce a riadoperare, ricontestualizzandoli al proprio tempo, delle tecniche del passato. Ad esempio, il fondo dell'Incoronazione della Vergine ritorna all'uso del fondo con foglia d'oro. Riesce a adoperarla e gestirla con un concetto quasi spaziale, rinascimentale, perché lui immagina nell'incontro tra le due figure di Cristo e la Madonna nell'incoronazione come se si sprigionasse una grande luce. La foglia d'oro è lavorata con dei raggi che partono dal punto di incontro delle due figure. I due personaggi principali sono davanti, dietro ci sono degli angeli che sono dietro i raggi scaturiti dalla luce. Il miracolo sacro viene reso tridimensionalmente grazie a questa tecnica dell'adoratura.
The era of the ancient gods had come to an end, replaced by religious piety, reflected in the somber, sacred images of sorrow that populate his paintings. Gone is the lightness of touch of his Venus. Jesus Christ takes center stage.
The Botticelli painting that I find most moving is his Lamentation in Milan. Extraordinary quality is how all the figures are moved to the foreground. They're piled as if one on top of the other. The neck of the figure and the body are twisted. They don't follow the laws of nature. We've seen this before, how Botticelli transforms the body for beauty, and here he distorts the body in order to convey the sense of grief of Christ's followers.
Un'opera impressionante è il compianto di Cristo di Monaco dell'Alte Pinakothek. C'è questo giovane Cristo imberbe, morto, di un colore cereo, in grembo alla madre che è svenuta e che viene consolata da San Giovanni Evangelista. Ci sono le pie donne, la Maddalena. Indubbiamente è una composizione che non poteva non influenzare il fedele, non colpirlo, non toccarlo profondamente.
I think one of the most representative work is a painted crucifix, which is now in Prato. When you look at this beautiful Christ, you can see that Botticelli managed to convey austerity, convey more humble images, but through grace. The torment of Christ has become a peaceful meditative gesture.
Through Botticelli's work, we bear witness to the seismic shift in Renaissance Florence. Without Lorenzo the Magnificent, what was once a powerhouse of creativity descends into darkness. Uncertain times follow, leading to the execution of Savonarola. On the 23rd of May 1498, the friar is hanged and burnt at the stake in Florence's main square.
Da allora Botticelli preferisce non avere più nulla a che fare col mondo di Firenze, col mondo politico di Firenze. Si trae in disparte e verso il 1501 fa il suo capolavoro, La nascita mistica. È un dipinto che non parla parla della nascita di Gesù e basta, parla anche della fine del mondo e quindi della fine dell'umanità e dell'avvento del regno dei cieli. Per questo Botticelli recupera il messaggio del fondo d'oro, e il fondo d'oro è il cielo, è l'eterno, è la perfezione dell'universo.
In the Mystic Nativity, in the upper part of the painting, there are angels holding scrolls with inscriptions. And these inscriptions come directly from sermons by Savonarola. Here's the smoking gun. There's no doubt that Botticelli was a follower of Savonarola, at least at the time when he painted this work.
Here, Botticelli completely abandoned this kind of naturalistic rendering of the space to go back to earlier examples where the main figures are bigger in scale than the minor figures in terms of hierarchy in the space. But you still have in the upper register these angels playing and dancing, and you can think this is remembering the golden age of these festivities, of this theatrical representation throughout the cities.
What we do know about Botticelli, we mainly know from his paintings. He is the storyteller par excellence, who understood how to use the soft power of art to his advantage. He is the man who invented beauty and the first artist to explore the female gaze. He is also the man who brought us hell. Through me, pass into the painful city. Through me, pass into eternal grief. Through me, pass among the lost people. Abandon all hope. Ye who enter here. The words of Dante Alighieri's Inferno resonate in Botticelli's work. The illustrations for the Divine Comedy tell us of an agonizing inner journey that the artist, who was already midway through his life, shared with Dante.
The poem itself is so full of images that a mind like Botticelli must have been completely fascinated with the possibilities that would open for him to design, to draw, to compose, to invent, to create.
Botticelli and Dante are very similar in the sense that they're two of the greatest minds and creators to come out of Florence, but they were separated by a century. Hell, as we think of it now collectively, is given to us by Dante, and the visual imagery of that is given to us by Botticelli.
Doveva essere un'impresa titanica, ciclopica, 92 disegni. Sono ancora oggi un capolavoro della grafica del Rinascimento. Sono rimasti tutti i disegni fatti a penna o a stilo, però alcuni soltanto, pochi sono stati colorati dall'artista.
every single scenes that illustrate hell, Inferno, are more metaphorical than purgatory and paradise. So you have this kind of extraordinary progression from very saturated compositions towards something that is less and less formal, less and less composed, and is almost like, I think the last sheet is just a very small point within a wide surface.
In these we see an enormous complexity. He's able to take many different scenes and pack them into one page. These are works that take time to appreciate. Botticelli is expecting you to read the text and look at the image, and we see figures that emerge from the woods, being chased by dogs, being bitten. We see figures in Inferno who are being tortured by devils. He includes an enormous range of emotions, of hand gestures, of body language. So Botticelli has a contrast between beauty and elegance and horror and blood. That is how Botticelli tells his stories.
Botticelli, the storyteller, knows how to touch the heart of the public, and his paintings are a chronicle of the time. Florence was unrecognizable from its heyday under Lorenzo the Magnificent. A city divided into warring factions, it was a time of repression, fear, and slander, all of which Botticelli distills into a sinister scene. A painting in tempera, on a small panel only 91 centimeters wide. The Calumny of Apelles. An ancient allegory that he uses to defend a friend slandered by false accusations. Between King Midas with donkey's ears and the naked truth, the victim is dragged along the ground by calumny. A real event becomes a metaphorical criticism of the society he is living in.
Artists of the caliber of Botticelli are extremely sought after in the sense that they are able to convey, to translate highly complex message in harmonious, clear ensemble.
If you want to make graphic novels, if you want to be good at that, you should look at Botticelli. Because even though he's working hundreds of years before the invention of the graphic novel, he is so succinct in his storytelling that as an illustrator, you could learn so much from Botticelli.
Within the Calumny of Apelles, which is quite a small work, there is about, if I remember well, 72 small reliefs. These include many works already treated by the artist. There is a Venus and Mars, you have a palace, and there is episode from Nastaggio degli Onesti. So you have many self-quotations that are readable only if you really look at the work.
Calumny ends Botticelli's golden era. Taste is changing fast. He's replaced by new giants, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael.
were alive during Botticelli's heyday, you could never have imagined in a million years that Botticelli would die unknown, and it broke.
Sappiamo da dei documenti che addirittura lui era disponibile ma non trovava da lavorare. Botticelli concluderà la sua vita malato, pieno di debiti e in piena crisi artistica.
To think that a man that has created paintings that have stood the test of time, that have become universal symbols of beauty, died without any kind of fanfare. No one noticed when Botticelli died. No one cared. This was not a great man in Florence anymore. It's like, how did that happen? How could that possibly have happened to Botticelli, who we love so much today?
Botticelli dies on the 17th of May, 1510. He was buried without pomp in the family vault of All Saints Church, penniless, alone, and forgotten. Genius, a symbol of the Renaissance. Yet after his death, Botticelli lay forgotten until the 19th century.
It's hard to believe today, but Botticelli fell out of fashion for centuries. Nobody talked about him, his works were not on view. The Primavera was in storage. In the late 19th century, Botticelli was discovered by the artists. It was the pre-Raphaelites who looked to the art of the past in order to make their creations for the present.
Pre-Raphaelites means pre-Raphael, before Raphael. Hence, the art for them stops before Raphael. And what is before Raphael the most extraordinary artist? It is Botticelli.
The nudity, the pagan subjects, the ambiguity, and the non-canonical body types. These are four reasons why Botticelli was rediscovered in the 19th century.
We have one important character called Dante Gabriele Rossetti. Fellow artist created a new vision, a new aesthetic from Botticelli's The Rediscovery. Especially from one painting that he owned, which is the famous so-called portrait of Smeralda Bondinelli. He interpreted this portrait as a woman at the window, and he would produce a series of women at the window.
After the pre-Raphaelites, the ethereal images of Botticelli, his nymphs and myths, take on different meanings, adapting to the times and new means of communication in the 20th century. The spread of mass culture sees new media reinterpreting and appropriating the artist's works, empowering and manipulating them. Centuries after its creation, Botticelli's art is exploited again for political propaganda.
Botticelli è uno dei casi in cui la pittura è stata utilizzata come logo di una cultura nazionale. Mussolini sceglie un'opera, la trasforma in canone e la esporta facendo un'equazione. Questa è la grande pittura italiana rinascimentale, questa è l'Italia. E l'ha portata nel 1939 a San Francisco, poi al MoMA a New York, e da quel momento Botticelli è diventato una sorta di rappresentanza dell'Italia all'estero. È una tipica operazione di appropriazione di un quadro di un autore con degli scopi che nulla hanno a che fare con la specificità dell'immaginario, per esempio, femminile botticelliano, e molto hanno a che fare col bisogno di un brand. Questa operazione è, come tutte le operazioni che vedono la politica usare l'arte, un'operazione costruita a tavolino. Sicuramente se gli americani conoscono Botticelli è grazie alla operazione di Mussolini. Botticelli è grazie a Andy Warhol.
You can understand why Warhol became obsessed by Botticelli, because it was so pop. Botticelli is very adaptable to modern trends. Before Andy Warhol, he's inspiring Italian artists like Giuseppe Fioroni, who was inspired by The Birth of Venus many years before Andy Warhol's version. Alexander McQueen, the fashion designer, had an entire collection about Botticelli, and my personal favourite is Lady Gaga, with her album inspired by Botticelli, recreated by the great contemporary artist Jeff Koons.
La Venere di Botticelli è da un lato il canone della bellezza occidentale, dall'altro il kitsch della bellezza occidentale. È una forma femminile che viene riconosciuta anche là dove non c'è.
Botticelli's art continues to be a multifaceted prism, refracting the imagination of its observers. His ideal of female beauty constantly repurposed and transformed, inspiring new theories. Interpretations of the androgyny of his subjects still ignite debate.
Botticelli è molto di più della sua Venere, che è diventata una cover girl spesso riprodotta in modo anche kitsch. Botticelli legittima un immaginario pittorico libero, e questo ha consentito a quegli storici dell'arte che si collocano in una prospettiva di gender studies di insistere sulla capacità di Botticelli di mostrare la sessualità e l'erotismo dei corpi uscendo dai canoni del femminile e del maschile e aprendosi a un mondo di androginia, di libertà, che era inimmaginabile attribuirgli anche solo fino a qualche anno fa.
Fashion, films, pop art, internet. The universal beauty created by Botticelli is rejuvenated by being continuously reimagined.
You can transpose these very iconic figures and make them say whatever you want. And this is the particularity of Botticelli, I think, much more than any other painter.
Botticelli was a visionary artist. He didn't try to paint according to rules and canons. He created his own sense of beauty.
In the last century, because of the rebirth of Botticelli mania, everybody went back to Florence. And we go to Florence today and we feel that. We feel the electricity that existed in the Italian Renaissance. And I think you feel it most strongly when you stand in front of Botticelli's paintings in the Uffizi. They're electrifying. They're a sort of portal into that world.
From symbol of Medici Florence and the Renaissance to global brand, Botticelli crosses the boundaries of time and space to become part of the collective imagination. Now, as then, he is a powerful influencer. His masterpieces speak a universal, contemporary language. On the shores of the Arno River, Botticelli awaits. Florence is everything, and all the rest is nothing.